Welcome to the Curious Hope Podcast, where we wrestle with hard topics and hidden questions. My name is Pastor JD. I'm here at Blue Mountain Community Church, and right now I'm actually on the phone talking with one of my very good friends from seminary, Pastor Austin Matthews. Welcome to the podcast, Austin.
Thank you, JD. Good to be here.
We're continuing our series called City on a Hill, ? Where we look at how we as Christ followers should engage culture. And this week, I'm really excited about this week because it's something I've sort of been thinking about for a while, is we're going to be talking about social media and cell phones. So I'm really excited to start this conversation. But first, Austin, because none of our listeners, almost guaranteed, know nothing about you, tell us a little bit about yourself. What do you do? How did we meet? Just introduce us to yourself a little bit.
Yeah, so I met you at Princeton Seminary, and I went in there thinking that I wanted to be a military chaplain, which is hilarious because I have asthma, so that did not work out. But I am currently an associate pastor of sorts at a church in Apex, North Carolina. It's a new church. It's about 3 years old, and right now we are holding our Sunday services outside. So it's quite the mobile church right now. So it's a great job. I'm doing outreach and preaching and teaching, and so that's exactly where I want to be right now. But in the future, I'm thinking that I want to pursue a PhD, possibly in peace and theology.
That's awesome. So your church is meeting outside right now. Our church here at Blue Mountain Community Church, we actually met outside for a while. But what ended up happening is it started getting colder and colder and colder, and so we couldn't do that anymore.
Yeah.
And you're in North Carolina right now, right?
Yes.
So what's the weather like? Are you still able to hold services outside?
We are. So obviously we'll cancel if there's rain. And now we have to check the weather for too much wind, because one weekend wind blew down our speakers and our camera. So it's just more things to look out for. But we haven't had a Sunday colder than 40 degrees. I think
Oh,
there
that's
was a
not
40,
bad.
40 or 45 degree. But this is North Carolina, so we're not used to that Washington weather up there.
Yeah.
If it were to get in the 30s, I don't think we would have it. But our pastor is like hot-blooded and would wear a t-shirt in 40 degrees.
Oh my.
Whereas every other person out there is wearing like two jackets. And
it's funny that you talk about wind, because that's what happened once. Is our head pastor, Pastor Jim, was preaching a sermon, and then the wind blew all of his notes off of the stand that he was using, and he covered for it awesomely. Like, no one really noticed. It was really funny, seeing that happen. But yeah, that's cool. It feels like all of us, because of what's happened with COVID, all of us who are working in churches, and it's not just churches, businesses, everyone has had to adapt, which is why this topic, I feel like, is so much more important to talk about now than it ever has been before, because what COVID has driven us to do is it's caused us to adapt technologically, to use social media more, cell phones. And one of the, let's just kickstart our conversation. How do you personally use social media, Austin?
so I think after COVID hit, and especially after a lot of the events of the summer, I stopped posting as much on Facebook, at least. I like to update people on Instagram and just show pictures, and in the story section of the app, just to interact a little bit more with closer friends. But I find that platforms like Facebook are so general, and you have so many friends that you don't really care about, that there's no reason to post too often. So I have been a little more incognito on Facebook, besides checking into my church every Sunday and giving the like a relationship status or just big updates like that, I've found that I am a little less involved.
Yeah. So do you find like the way that you use social media, do you find that it enhances like your connectivity to other people? Because it seems to me like you're saying Instagram helps you do that more than Facebook right now. Is that is social media able to help you enhance your life connections?
I would say that Facebook helps me keep track of people in the church that I can have a conversation starter with them, besides just having no icebreaker when I see them
Yeah.
and we meet. But those would be more for acquaintances, whereas friends, I'll send friends memes, through Instagram a lot, besides texting. And then with those story updates on Instagram, I think it's a lot more interactive. There's polls, there's just whatever kind of opinions, and it's easy to private message someone and laugh or catch up.
Hmm.
And I've caught up with a lot of people through that, which seems like a cheap way to catch up with someone, but um, I guess,
Well, I don't think so. You're talking about how you'll use Facebook more for acquaintances, and Instagram will help you connect deeper with people you know. And that's actually one of the reasons I wanted to have. I thought of you immediately when I thought of talking about social media and cell phones, is because um, in my limited, so I'm not on social media now, but when I was, I remember you were engaged in social media, but you did it in a great way to where like you could connect with people, start conversations with them through social media. But I just find that that's really interesting that, yeah, you use some avenues of social media to connect in one way and other avenues to connect in others, almost like it's sort of a tool, huh?
yeah, absolutely. I think, like I could give you other examples. There are other chat apps. Like there's one for well, WhatsApp is pretty popular, but I use that primarily to check in on friends in India and message them. And then there's a Korean messaging app called Kakao Talk, and I talk to my Korean friends on that one. And then anyone that I can't get a hold of through text, I'll just go through Messenger, and then Instagram is more for closer friends. Yeah, so it's kind of like you can compartmentalize
Hmm.
across platforms, which is funny because three of those platforms are owned by Facebook. Um,
So all of your data is going to one place, but you get
exactly.
you get
Yeah.
to use it how it best uses. So it seems like those are a lot of good ways that use social media to connect with people, to keep in touch with people.
Yeah.
What are some ways that you have seen conflict, the flip side of the coin? What are ways that you've seen conflict rise up because of social media? Um, and I'll share an example from myself first that you're familiar with. I wasn't good at using social media, using social media. And Austin, you're aware there were times where I would get involved in a debate or a talk, and it just wasn't constructive. And that was something that I realized about myself is, oh, I'm using this not to build bridges or connect with people. It's rather to
Yeah.
whether it's say stand up for something I believe in, but that's not constructive at all, when it's done through
Right.
a social media platform. And so for me, I realized, at least in my life, that, I didn't know how, or I just wasn't using it in a constructive way. What are some examples of social media being used in bad ways that you've experienced or that you've just seen recently?
I think that's exactly what I have seen is that on through the summer when the nation and the world had to really figure out how to talk about race um, and police brutality, there were way too many opinions going around acting like they were the smartest on on social media, and there were just a lot of posts that would blow up, and I think it's so much more vitriolic over Facebook because it's in writing.
Hmm.
It's not something, and everyone knows if you delete it. So you want to come off as really smart, and you take a lot of time with your comments, and you think about it when you step away from Facebook, and you think about how am I going to respond and all this kind of stuff, and it it ends up being this uh, just kind of this black hole where if you're not careful, you'll spend way too much time thinking about either a post that you're going to get a lot of likes on, or you're going to figure out how to respond to someone who, in your, mind, is an idiot or has a completely bad opinion. And I just do not think that that is the best platform for that kind of stuff. On Instagram, for example, and I went and joined a Black Lives Matter march in the summer. I joined a few, but I posted a picture of one. And like I said, Instagram is more for closer friends. But one of my friends from college, he commented on my Instagram picture and said like, "Oh, that's so stupid." And I've learned, I think by now, that that is not the place to start a comment war. So yeah, I think private messaging people really does go a long way. And when people say that no one's opinion has been changed through Facebook, I think that's actually completely untrue, especially if you use the private messaging through either Facebook, Instagram, whatever you're going to use, because a conversation, personally, you're less concerned about every word being right. You're less concerned about what other people think. It's just you and the other person. And I think just a natural conversation is so much of a better way to go about it. But unfortunately, just for something, like you said, that I believed in, someone, I pretty much lost a friend over it because he refused to see eye to eye, and I was like, "Hey, man, this shouldn't come between us, especially if I haven't talked to you in 2 or 3 years."
Yeah.
And it's crazy how triggered people get on either side of whatever opinion, political party or whatnot. So I think politically, talking about race is just that's social media. If you inundate it, I think a lot of people. I think on the flip side of a positive way, social media has influenced things. I think from the summer, a lot of people came in contact with a lot of opinions that they had never heard before because people would share videos. And because it was such a hot button issue, I think people actually clicked on those videos and started listening to opinions who they would never usually listen to. And it seemed like all of a sudden people who I would have thought could, um, come out of ignorance about maybe how someone else would feel, like from a different background, from a different race, they started to wisen up and show more sensitivity and check what they were saying. That was very interesting to me. Um, just as I yeah
Yeah, so
it
it seems like what you're saying is what we've done is we've taken a tool that can really help people connect one on one, and then turned it almost into when it gets turned into a popularity contest, and I'm gonna put a jab here that's going to get a lot of likes, or I'm gonna try to prove someone wrong publicly.
mhm.
That's not the format for it. But I also hear you saying that it can be good when people are exposed to differing opinions or worldviews that they wouldn't have experienced otherwise. But here's my concern, if I can push back a little bit on this.
Yeah.
I want to bring in a documentary that I saw recently, and that one of our listeners also talked about, that it would be good for us to talk about. It's this documentary called The Social Dilemma. You can go and watch it right now. If you're listening to the podcast, you can watch this documentary on Netflix. It's a really good documentary, and what it talks about how social media, what it does is it feeds us opinions and viewpoints, videos and pictures that we would tend to agree with. And the reason for that is, say I like baseball, right? If a video of a baseball player talking or playing baseball pops up, I'm more likely to stay on Facebook and watch that than I am to
Right.
watch a video on killer whales, right? Or something
Right.
else random. And so what ends up happening is these algorithms are programmed, and the reason they want you to stay on Facebook is because that's more ad revenue. It all comes down to money. And so these programs, these algorithms, are designed to show you information videos and Facebook posts, all social media, Instagram posts, whatever it is, to show you all this information that you will already agree with. So what it does is it feeds into, your biases. And so that's what the whole documentary is about, is how these algorithms that show you, they show you what you want to see
Yeah.
in order to keep you hooked longer. And so this is a roundabout way, getting back to what you were talking about, that it's good because a lot of people have been exposed to viewpoints that they wouldn't normally have, right? But at the same
Right.
time, and if you believe this, I'm sorry, but someone who's, believes in conspiracy theories, they see a video for that the earth is flat, right? Then what will end up happening is if more people post about that, say that person has a tendency of being interested in stuff like that, then the algorithm will
Mm-hmm.
pick up on that and show them more and more and more videos of, the earth being flat, and then they'll become convinced because, they've been exposed to that. So that's and
Right.
that's a completely different topic than what you were talking about, and I'm not trying to draw a parallel, but all that I'm saying is this exposure to differing viewpoints it can be a tremendous positive, like it was in the instance this summer with people who really need to be exposed to the suffering and the worldview and the life view and the life experiences of people of different races than them. That's something that was very much needed. But don't you think it can also be a negative when people are exposed to silly viewpoints like the earth being flat?
Oh, definitely. I think just naturally those algorithms would keep certain people, you know, in looking at their own opinions and the views they want to, and to a certain extent, it's neutral. So neutral in the way of I go on Facebook and there's a little TV button or a play button,
Mm-hmm.
and you just watch clips of whatever. And because I have watched so many clips of Steve Harvey's Family Feud, that is pretty much everything that is suggested to me is that. And then, of course, Facebook is listening to you. So I was watching a couple episodes of Friends with my girlfriend, and then it would show me clips of Friends.
Oh, wow, that's actually creepy.
Right. It is creepy. It's creepy in the way that Amazon knows exactly what you want because you mentioned it to your family, and they'll advertise it to you as soon as you go onto the website. So, I mean, they're listening, they're watching, they know what we want, and they'll advertise it to us. Uh, what is so to a certain extent, yes, you are still remaining in your bubble, no matter how much you think you're drifting. Even the Google searches
Yeah, that's true.
that you do are tailored to your opinion on the subject, which is kind of alarming because, of course, a lot of people will just go with the first or second thing that they see. Um,
Is there any way that we can take it back so that we can turn social media into only the positives, like you were talking about, where we can connect with people, where we can be exposed to differing viewpoints, but not be tailor-fed viewpoints that we'll agree with that cause us to become more and more extreme in our views? Is there any way to take it back, or do you think that social media is like any other tool? It's not good, it's not bad, it just depends on how we use it.
it's hard to make a value judgment on all of social media.
Mm-hmm.
I think some platforms are just designed and have been developed in such a way that they would maybe garner more negative consequences for people. I think that it. I think the second thing that you're saying, not that it's neutral, but it really is up to you um, to choose how you use it. It's not like you're going into a video game and there's one way to play it. It this is life where if you get into an argument in the comment section, you can personal message that person, or you can delete your post.
Yeah.
There's you get to decide how you respond always, and even if you realize that, if I realize I'm only seeing Steve Harvey videos and a bunch of stuff about Christian apparel in the advertisements and And I have unfollowed so many people on Facebook that now it's just this desolate uh, news feed of advertisements and and posts in foreign languages from friends across the world. That's what Facebook has become to me. Even if it's like that, you can still choose other apps. You can choose to pick up the phone and call someone, which of course we don't really like doing anymore. But it, there are, at the end of the day, if that is your way to connect to people, it's much better and it's much deeper, much more memorable to have a conversation with them. And I think if we keep that in mind, then then we can supplement all of that with social media. I'm not going to necessarily call all my acquaintances on Facebook or
Yeah.
all my friends on Instagram. It's nice to keep up with them in that way. But if I want to actually talk to them, hear how they're doing, pray with them, it's much more meaningful to text them or to call them.
I think that's really, really wise what you said. And I think I think that really just answers pretty much just the question that I sort of came into this conversation with. Is that at the center of our use of social media has to be conversations, because conversations are the anchor of relationships. It's all about relationships, is at least what I hear you saying. It's about our relationships between us and the other person. It's not us and the masses. It's us. Each person we talk to is a human being. And if we use social media to connect to human beings, then good, and that's great. But if it's being used to not connect well with human beings, then that's when it's being misused or shouldn't be used. But I think it's really great that you bring it up like that. So now, Austin, I'd like to sort of shift our conversation to something that's very related and talk about cell phones. So here's a, a question. Do you know anyone that's always on their cell phone when you're trying to talk to them?
Yes.
How, tell me a little bit about that. How does it feel? What scenarios? What is it like?
It's funny because now that you mention that, I think I've kept friends around that don't do that. Um, I think a lot of my closest friends, if I'm going to sit down with them, eat with them, they're not constantly checking their cell phones, which is great. But I've noticed how I can be with a best friend and we're just hanging out, and then they'll they'll see something and then they'll get kind of go down the rabbit trail on social media, or maybe they are watching. This is a common one. They're watching Netflix or some
While
movie or
you're in the
TV
same
show.
room as them?
Oh, so we can be watching something together,
Oh,
right?
okay. But then they
But
start watching something on their phone.
they'll start watching something on their phone. They'll check their email. Uh, they'll play, you know, iPhone games, which is to me kind of sad because it shows how short of an attention span we have. It's not that they're not interested in the TV show. It's not that they think the movie sucks. It's just that you want to have two things going on at the same time all the time, which to me is interesting. I don't think it's necessarily just cell phones.
Yeah.
I think it's that as a society we are so busy, we're so work oriented, and we have to be doing something. And so even in those moments that are special and like you'd remember them, where you sit down and you just have a beer or have a meal. I don't know if I can say that.
No, you can say that. Don't worry.
Okay. Yeah.
Jesus drank wine too. It's okay.
Yes, he did. If you just want to sit down and have a really good conversation with someone, it feels like, and I felt this. I don't know if you felt this.
Yeah.
I'm not doing enough. I'm not doing enough. I have to be
Hmm.
doing something at the same time, and I watch out for that and try to be careful with that. But I think other people, whether they're recognizing it or not, um, they, I think, unless I'm projecting myself onto everyone else, I think we want to be doing a couple of things at once.
Well, why do you think that is? So it's almost like we all, but I don't think you're projecting it onto people, because I've found in my own life that tendency to the tendency to always have to have something to do, to never have
Yeah.
nothing, to never be bored.
Yeah.
And sometimes in a conversation, like when you're with someone else, if there's a silent pause, or if you're watching a movie, the thing that always struck me is in seminary. I remember so vividly that we would have a water break because we had classes that were like 3 hours long.
Right.
We would have a water break in between, right? In the second that water break, or like to go to the bathroom for 15 minutes, the second that break hit, I remember one day I looked around the room, every single person in the class, and I'm not exaggerating, every single person pulled out their cell phones and was on their cell phones. It's almost like we use it to fill the gaps. But why do you think that is? Like, why do you think we
Yeah.
have to be busy? Like, we're trying to fill the gaps with something. Why?
I hmm. I have pretentious answers, and then I have answers that are easier. I think the easy answer would be that we there's some just from an entertainment standpoint, there's something more interesting than what's going on right now. So if there's a lull in the conversation, oh, let me just check Facebook. There might be something interesting.
So you think it's
Uh,
almost because of our consumeristic mindset too, that we want to consume, and if we get a bigger dopamine hit from Facebook than we do from having a
yeah,
conversation with the person
yeah.
in class next to us, then we're going to take that bigger dopamine hit from Facebook. Is that
I think
huh?
that's a large part of it. Yeah,
Is there any
I think
other
it's
elements to that too that you would add?
yeah. There's an element, and maybe if you want to entertain me down the rabbit
Let's
trail
go
here,
down the
but
rabbit trail, Austin. Let's go
it
down the rabbit trail.
I think when I stop to think about it, sometimes there'll be days, maybe even weeks, when I don't know if I've had just a moment where I'm not looking at anything and I can just think, or I can just have a true, like, really good conversation and I'm not doing something. And I've asked myself, why? Is it because I constantly need to be entertained? I think so. But I think it's also because, for me at least, I'm scared to um, think about kind of the larger issues that are going on in my life. And so, like, if I can think not so much about the future, what I have to do to get to here and here and here, maybe analyze a friendship that may be going sour and what I can do within that relationship, just et cetera, et cetera, but things that actually matter. The less thought I have to put into that, the happier I'll be. I don't have to confront those things, and I can go weeks without doing that, without seriously putting thought into that. And that's kind of scary to me because I willingly enslave myself to constant entertainment and pursue that and make hobbies out of that, even, and collecting movies, or buying more video games, or just amassing this pointless book collection, stuff like that. Like, that's what I'm into, but other people will just uh, be on their phones, watching all the TikToks they can, or getting as far as they can in their app game, or they'll throw themselves into another construction project, or they'll just busy themselves, busy, busy, busy. And I think, for me, they may all look different, and we may assess one thing as productive and one thing not productive.
Hmm.
But in the end, I think we are actively and successfully avoiding um, some of the deeper and important issues in our own lives that I think we just want to put it off. and and because we have infinite ways to fill the space and the time, I think uh, that is exactly what we do.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I'm with you, and to take it even a step further is what I've noticed, at least with myself, is it's not even just the anxieties of life, that when you take a second to just sit and think and dwell in nothingness or like boredom, it's not even just the anxieties of life, but it can be like existential anxieties too. Like when you're not doing anything with your phone late at night, you start to think like, well, what am I doing, in the world? What is it? Where's God? You start having these deeper, like, who am I? at least what for myself, I've noticed that these deep existential and spiritual questions tend to arise when I'm not busy.
Yes.
But it's really hard to wrestle with those questions. And so
Yeah.
it's a lot easier for me to pull out my phone and check Twitter than it is for me to sit there and think, wow, like I was a jerk today and I feel
Exactly.
terrible about
Exactly.
it. And I feel like I haven't talked to God or I'm pushing God away. That's those kind of existential spiritual questions are not fun to wrestle with. And so it's
No, they're
easier for me to
not.
pull out my phone and just distract myself.
That's why, yes, unless you make time, uh, church-wise and with your relationship with God, unless you make time for it, you're never going to arrive there. Um, like for me, one of the best things recently that has happened is that I've been getting up at 5:30 in the morning to go
Woo!
work out with my friends. Yeah, exactly. But besides the actual workout part, I wake up so early and I get back home and shower, and then I have so much time before everyone else is awake in the house, that I can have a very quiet devotional. I
Mm-hmm.
can spend a good amount of time in that, and I can leave my phone upstairs. I can I can just have that time, and that has been some of the um, one of the best decisions that I've made in this season, when really we do have so much time. Either we've lost a job, or we're transitioning between place to place, or our job demands less of us, perhaps, or we're able to see fewer people and go fewer places, so we just have naturally more time. With this more time, I know I can easily fill it up
Mm-hmm.
with hobbies, with, oh, I've always wanted to do this, let me do this. And I think maybe it might be wiser just to sit back and prioritize and say, when have I last really sat and talked with God?
Mm-hmm.
When's the last time that I've really um, even written something in a devotional, or spent time reading what's important to me? And without making that time, I think we will always fill it up, because we have so many ways of filling up
Mm-hmm.
the time that we would rather not spend, like you said, thinking about how you might have been a jerk, or
Mm-hmm.
possibly thinking about the future. And maybe just as a slight add on to that, I think it causes a lot of anxiety. And we know what we're doing when we do that some of the time, and we push off issues, and we push off
Mm-hmm.
concerns that we should be addressing, and it builds up in the back of our minds. And we know we should get to X and Y, but we don't. And I think it builds up a lot of anxiety.
Hmm.
Um, yeah.
Well, I think it's great. I think it's great because this conversation, we got right to the heart of it because we started talking about cell phones. What cell phones are in relation to all of this is it's the easiest excuse to not set aside time for God and for this quietness. It's the easiest. With before cell phones, it was much harder to stay busy 24/7. Because as you're when you wake up and say you're walking somewhere, you can't pull out your cell phone and just be on your cell phone. And so cell phones, it's almost like um, the easiest way to not do what we're talking about, which is so important, and that is the setting aside time. I know for myself, um, you brought up something really great. You notice you mentioned I leave my cell phone upstairs while you're having your devotional time, right? Isn't
Yeah.
that's what you said? It's funny because for me, the intimate time that I have with God every single day is when I'm driving to work. I never turn the music on, and I can't be on my cell phone while I'm driving, right? Like for
Yeah.
me, the most intimate time that I have with God is when I can't be doing anything to distract myself. Now you could say driving's distracting, but it's really not. Like my brain's pretty much off, when I'm driving, and so that's the time
Yeah,
that
especially when you have your route to work that you don't have to
Exactly.
think
Yeah.
about.
So at least for me, I found that to be because I've tried to have other times of devotional, when I'm home before bed, but I've always found myself, it's so easy to get distracted and to pull out my cell phone and to, do that either right before, right after, or during the time that's supposed to be set aside. But I think it's so important that when we do have these times that are set aside, that cell phone has got to be somewhere else while it's happening.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny you say that because I have had to just I love my playlists. I am very proud of all the playlists that I've made and how well curated I think they are to my tastes, and then when I have someone else in the car and they compliment it.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes, like you're saying, to turn off the music and to just pray is that's great. That's
Mm.
also I've told this to people and people have laughed, but the shower is another place because
Seriously, you can't have your phone in the shower, can you? That's
I mean you
brilliant.
could now. But I mean if you're on your phone in the shower, I think there is something wrong.
Yeah.
Or more wrong than usual. um, and sometimes I won't even, I'll just sit there, not because the water feels especially good or anything. It's just because I want to keep praying.
Yeah.
And so there are those special times by accident that you have, or by just happenstance. But to actually take the time, I mean, if you have an hour journey in your car, uh, to and from work, or if that's an
Mm-hmm.
hour round trip or something like that, that's a significant amount of time in the day to take and to think and to,
Mm-hmm.
meditate and just, wrestle in your mind what's going on in your life. I think that's amazing. Um, so that would be something good for me to
So
do more of.
yeah, and this is yeah, if you're listening, I hope you know we're not speaking as two people that have it all figured out. So I have my quiet time with God in the car, but I'm tempted every time I try to read my Bible or do my devotionals. My phone is there, and it's it's a temptation to be distracted. So we need to constantly be on the lookout and share strategies. Like I didn't even think about using the shower as a place to think, to have almost a short little moment with God in devotional time because of the absence of
Hmm.
distraction. So it's great to share different strategies and ways we can do that. So with all this being said, Austin, do you think we should just flush our cell phones down the toilet and get rid of all technology?
No, absolutely not. I think
So
that we
qualify.
have.
Let's qualify our answers there. Why not?
I think we've made cell phones necessary to our lives in positive ways. GPS, actually calling people and texting people. I don't know about you. I do not text so many people in the day that I don't get work done. That's not where my time is being wasted.
Yeah.
It's, I mean, it can be if I'm bored and I want to just send memes in the middle of work, but uh, that's not really where I waste time.
Hmm.
Um, and so, as a relational, to build relationship, to keep up with people, to get where you need to go, to wake up on time, all these things. I think cell phones are good, smartphones are good. Where it gets bad is if when you have all the apps you could ever need to distract you at all times of the day. I think it's nice to have. What I try to do is I try to keep one screen of apps,
Okay.
and that's it. And I know that I could spend infinite amounts of time on YouTube
Yeah.
and Netflix and stuff, but still, I don't have. I'm not thinking, oh, I have this entire row of apps to like check in on and update. That's been good for me, and just like anyone, I find myself exiting out of Facebook, for example, and then logging straight back into it to check my feed, and I'm like, wait, I just,
I
I
just
just did
exited out.
this, you know.
Well, I'm the same way. So I'm a big fantasy sports fan, and I've had to delete the fantasy football and the fantasy basketball app off of my phone because it's
Yeah,
a lot of fun. But then what ends up happening is I check it, and then
yeah,
5 minutes later, nothing's happened or ever will happen, but it becomes just automatic distraction. So I think that's a good qualifier that you said. That's really wise that um, phones are good and they can be used for a lot of good things, but they shouldn't be used to distract us.
and I think not everything is neutral. Like, uh, they say money's neutral, or we're saying social media maybe is neutral in certain instances. It's not having to figure out whether something's neutral.
Yeah.
It's that if you can, if you're getting positive aspects out of it, say like a cell phone, things that we just take for granted and we that's just part of our society. We just make sure we're using it well and make sure we're using it I mean, this sounds cheesy, but to the glory of God. Like if you're, and you can do that in so many ways.
Yeah.
So maybe to circle back just really quickly to social media, um, there's a lot of ways to boost, your church and to advertise, what you're doing and all that kind of stuff. So
That's awesome. That's great. It's a great reminder to not make it a black and white issue, where all social media is bad and cell phones are bad, but
right.
we can think deeper about this. How can we use it? You said it was cheesy. I thought it was great. How can we use this for the glory of God? How can I use this as a responsible Christ follower?
Right, and it doesn't mean that I'm going to try to create my own Christian bubble or to go back to some 1950s white bread Christianity and start posting Bible verses every day, which some people do, and they love it and they get likes, and that is their community, and that
Well,
is
for some
wonderful.
people,
But
that's uplifting and upbuilding too. So don't be careful.
absolutely.
Don't diss. Be careful.
No, absolutely. That for some people that is just the best reminder every day. But for me, I know that's if I'm doing that, sometimes I know that I'm doing that just to get the likes.
Yeah,
And then I have to be careful.
out of self righteousness.
Exactly, and I'm not ever trying to pretend personally that I am only a Christian within Christian culture,
Yeah.
and that I am going to suddenly make everything that I do on my cell phone and everything on social media like only Christian memes, or for example.
Yeah.
That's not any sort of direction where I'm kind of going with it. It's just to say like you're handling what you're given wisely. You're being good stewards of
The tools that God has given us.
exactly.
The tools to connect, because you've given so many examples of how we can use social media and cell phones to connect with other people that we love. They literally can help us love people better.
Exactly.
So
yeah.
that's great. Well, Austin, we're running out of time, so I just want to say thank you so much for being on the podcast. It's been great talking to you.
Thanks, JD. Yeah, this is good.
Yeah, and thanks to all of you who are listening. If you like the podcast, make sure that you share it. Make sure that you follow it so you can be updated every time we release a new episode. Our next episode, if you haven't seen the news, we've moved from every week to every other week. So look for our next episode, not next Wednesday, but the Wednesday after next Wednesday, where we'll be talking more about how Christ followers should engage with culture. And last but not least, if you have any questions, make sure that you email them to us at thecuriousHopePodcast@gmail.com. Once again, thank you so much, Pastor Austin.